welcome to another booktube video from me, Lauren, from Lauren and the Books. I hope you're having a very lovely Sunday. Had a very lovely Sunday. This is going up in the evening. And yeah, I've had a lovely Sunday. So far it's going well. Me and David have had a lovely clean of the house. It feels lovely, and we're about to play 2 board games, a Marvel Villainous game and a Call the Midwife board game as well. So that's very, very exciting. Here's today's video is me talking about the books that I read in the month of April. Read 9 months in the month of 9 books in the month of April, 1 DNF, and the stats are, I seem to have sacked off a lot of the stats. I was doing like how many books I'm reading from my book hauls, how many books I'm reading from my TBR, but we're just getting down to the books that I've got and how many I'm reading and from what, not even genres. I should start putting them in genres, but read 9 books this month, 3 of which were books that I owned, which was 33% of my reading, 2 of which were audio, which was 22% of my reading, 4 were from the library, 44% of my reading. So overall that means I've read 40 books so far this year, go me. 17 of those have been my own, which have been 43% of my reading. So pleased that I'm getting through some of these guys. I think this is in part due to me doing my first line battle as well. That means I'm definitely reading a sort of age-old book from my shelf every month. 11 books have been audio, which is 27% of my reading. 11 books have also been from the library, so also 27% of my reading. And 1 book I've borrowed, which is 3% of my reading. But the stats are over now, so let's talk about what I actually read in the month. A few of these are going to be Women's Prize for Fiction longlist books, so you may well have already watched my Women's Prize for Fiction longlist video, in which case there might be a bit of repetition, but hey, I've got a different t-shirt on. That'll feel different, won't it? So the first book was Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes. I listened to this on audio, longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. And this is where, and it's official, this is where mythological retellings and me part ways. I've always been sure that this would be something that I would love, a genre that I would love, but I've never loved it. And the only reason I really read these is because they get longlisted and shortlisted for prizes, mainly the Women's Prize, and then I read them and then think, oh, I didn't enjoy that. So I had quite a few on my shelves of proofs that have been sent to me of retellings, and I just got rid of all of them because I was like, I just don't enjoy them. And this one was no different really. This was a retelling of Medusa's life. Natalie Haynes herself reads the audiobook, and I've got to say, I enjoyed the sort of chattier style of this. This was like, and it was sassy, and there were sort of like comebacks, and I think that's why I scored it 2 stars rather than 1 star. But it just didn't grab me. There were so many characters in this, like so many, which is really, really hard to keep track on, particularly when like you're listening to it on audio. And yeah, I just don't think these things are for me. And I know they're for a lot of other people, so hurrah. But yeah, this isn't for me, and I've now parted ways with Greek myth retellings. I'm really unhappy about, there we go, that's, what is it? I just like these to be central. Next up was a book, The Archers, Ambridge at War, by Catherine Miller. My father-in-law fell very unwell in March, and upon his recovery, something that we both have been very, very into is The Archers for many years now, and we both had this book, and we said that we would read a chapter a day. They're set out through months, so we would read a chapter a day, a month a day for the first half of April, and we did that, and we chatted about it over messages, and we had a really, really good time doing it, and we both really enjoyed this book as well. So that was a lovely experience, and we're doing it again in May. May starts tomorrow, so we've got the next Archers book, which sadly the front cover isn't quite as good. I really like this front cover, and I think that the art itself is very good. I like all these, I mean, I love lilac, so I like all these lilacs. The new cover, I can't show you with the next one. I can show you, it's just there, 1 minute. The next one, we're reading The Archers' Home Fires at Ambridge. Look at that, that's very funny, isn't it, that front cover? But yeah, we had a really good time reading this, and like I said, we read a chapter every day, which is a month a day, and I love things that are set seasonally, so this was really fun to sort of like experience the seasons in somewhere where farming is very much the daytime job, especially during the war, because there was a lot of people left behind who were sort of farming for the country and that sort of thing. So this goes into sort of like everything I love about The Archers was represented here in this book, which is a prequel to The Archers, and includes some of the characters that we have in The Archers now, but them as like very young people. So for example, Bert Horrobin in this is a baby, Peggy is a sort of 16-year-old gutsy Londoner who comes down when her brothers are evacuated to here. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and it's sort of like village gossip. There's a storyline of these notes, anonymous notes that keep getting left around the village with like secrets of people that live within the village. So someone who's having an affair, someone who maybe isn't quite as ill as they've said they are, and that sort of thing. And me and David's dad were like speculating, saying, who do you think sending these notes? Who do you think the next note's going to be about? And yeah, we had a really, really good time reading it. One thing I will say, and I wasn't expecting this, is that this had an awful lot of shagging for a book that I was discussing with my father-in-law, so that was a bit of a surprise, but we both had a laugh about it. But yeah, much more shagging in this. I mean, one of the storylines is that somebody's having an affair with a younger woman, so I can, like, that was where the majority of the shagging comes. There was like some pretty intense shagging exploits in here. So yeah, we had a lovely time with this. I think if you were a fan of The Archers, you will also love this, and tune in for my May wrap up to see what I thought of the next book. But yeah, I'm looking forward to starting that. That starts in June, this one. This one ran from January to December. This one starts in June the following year. Wonder if there'll be any more. I mean, they're eventually going to have to stop because then they'll catch up with when the actual Archers started. But yeah, I think this is a really good thing. If you've got I mean, I've said this before, haven't I? If you've got an interest in something, like I've said this about Call the Midwife, and then you read something like that sort of accompanies that, it's just an extension of your joy, which I'm always here for. Next up was Strange Sally Diamond by Liz Nugent. This has got this out from the library and it's gone back already. Big long waiting list on this one. This was a book that I found out about from the Sarah Cox Between the Covers book recommendations. She's written like that show has given me two of like the most gripping books I've read this year, and I'm actually reading a third one that I've got a recommendation from that book, and they're all very much page turners. Sometimes the writing's not like the best writing I've ever read, but like if you're after a page turner, that's where you should go. But Strange Sally Diamond by Liz Nugent. I've read one other book by Liz Nugent who got, I think I saw Graham Norton talking about Liz Nugent. She's an Irish author, and this book is very much like Eleanor Oliphant. If you enjoyed Eleanor Oliphant and her sort of delivery and her neurodivergence, then I think you'll really enjoy Sally Diamond in this book. So it's about, starts off being about Sally Diamond, who lives at home with her elderly father, and it's very sort of like you're straight in with this narrative of her dad joking around with her and saying, oh, when I die, Sally, just put me out with the bins. And Sally, who sort of takes instruction as that is what you should be doing, does that. When he dies, she puts him out with the bins, and that leads into a few people looking into her life and looking into her and what her life's been, and as a result of that, she gets a bit more involved in her community, and we find out more about Sally's backstory. And I mean, this book is not without its many, many trigger warnings. There's kidnapping, trigger warnings for kidnapping, sexual assault, oh God, domestic abuse. Awful, awful things happen in this book, awful, awful. But the driver behind this, the sort of, the way it's written, I couldn't put the bloody thing down. I was obsessed with it. So it's a dual narrative, which in these sort of thriller books always works very well. I'm loath to sort of tell you what the thriller part of this book is, because you don't even really know until sort of like towards the end where this is going. But yeah, the dual narrative of Sally and then a guy you're hearing from, whose perspective is just so hard to read because he's so his actions are so awful, but he's such a product of his upbringing. I mean, I never at any point felt sorry for him, but you're like, bloody hell, no wonder he's like this. Look at his father. And there's just so much troublesome stuff going on in here. But my God, I would really... It's a shame it's in hardback, because I think I like to make a video of sort of like page turners you can take away with you for your summer holiday. But I don't always feel like hardbacks are sort of page turnery books that you can take away on holiday. But if you've got a Kindle, you might want to read this on holiday. I mean, you might want to take a hardback on holiday. It's up to you. But yeah, this was an absolute page turner. Really great writing skill behind it, really driving force, and yeah, the thriller aspect of it was really impressive. I've recommended it to my colleague who loved Eleanor Oliphant, and she's listening to the audiobook of it and she says it's very good. But yeah, would highly recommend if you're after a page turner. Next up was another book from the Women's Prize longlist. It was Homesick by Jennifer Croft. I listened to this on audio. I did not enjoy this. This was a mad one because it was 4 hours long, so it wasn't a long thing, but I just didn't feel any connect to it at all. It's a coming of age story about two sisters, one of whom is very unwell and dealing with hospital appointments and things like that, and another who is a fabulous translator and goes on to have a career being a translator, and their sort of relationship and their relationships with others. But it just did nothing for me. Like, every time I was listening to it, I was basically thinking, well, let's just get through this, it's only 4 hours, which is an awful way to be with a book. And in those instances, sometimes I think, oh, maybe I should just DNF this, because my review of this is not going to be fun for anyone. But I did go through it, and yeah, I didn't enjoy it, and the end, I guess. Next up was Tales from the Tudor Courts in the Shadow of the Queen, Queens by Alison Vere. We're there. I did a reading vlog of this video, so you will know that last year I read all of the Alison Weir 6 Tudor Queens books about each of Henry VIII's wives, and this was sort of like an accompaniment. It's got 2 short stories per queen, 3 in the case of Catherine Howard, and these came out when the ebooks of the 6 Tudor Queen series came out, so these were sort of like little bonus bits that come on the ebooks, and they collated them and put them in a collection. They came out in hardback, and now they're out in paperback, which was lovely. And yeah, I had a great time reading these. It was really interesting because sometimes there was perspectives from characters that I wanted to hear more about. Sometimes it was like modern stuff, which was really interesting. For example, one of the Anne Boleyn stories is about a tour guide who works on the Anne Boleyn Walk, and that was very interesting. And then sometimes we heard about characters that I wanted to hear more from. So like, for example, from Mary, Catherine of Aragon and Henry VIII's daughter, there was a story from her point of view. But yeah, I very much enjoyed it. I mean, I really enjoyed doing those videos last year and reading all of the series and watching Six the Musical and everything. So this was just like an extension of the fun that I had. There will be another 6 Tudor Queens vlog coming up. Probably the last, unless there's going to be more 6 Tudor Queens books. But Alison Weir has written a book from the perspective of Henry VIII. And I will be reading that and dressing as the Queens and doing all of those things that I love to do later on. That's out in May. I put a reservation on it at the library, but actually the publisher, this was mad, the publisher got in touch with me and said, well, got in touch with, I imagine, a lot of people who review books, so Bookstagram people, booktubers, booktokers, and emailed and said, oh, we've got some finished copies of the Henry VIII book, would you like a copy? So I emailed back, literally, I got the email and emailed back, and they emailed me back and said, oh, sorry, we haven't got any finished ones left. I was literally like, the email come through and then I emailed back. So they said they're sending me a proof. That was about a week ago. The proof hasn't arrived. Whatever happens, if the library book comes, I'll do it when the library book comes out. I'm second in the line at the library. But if I get the proof, I'll do it. But hopefully that'll happen in May. If not, probably a bit later on in the summer. But yeah, I had a great time with that. And I'll link the vlog that I did with this down below. Next up, another Women's Prize longlist book. That was The Bandit Queens by Parini Shroff. Reading this, started it, thought this is going to be a 5-star. Absolutely loving it. It's following a woman called Geeta, who lives in a rural Indian village, and her partner has been missing for so long, and there's sort of like questions about whether or not she may have murdered him. And then when women from the village start coming to her and saying, my husband's treating me so bad, will you help me out with him? She starts thinking about other things she can do to help the other women in her village. But yeah, I really enjoyed the beginning of it. I really enjoyed the beginning of it. I enjoyed the end of it. The middle was just fluff, and it just felt so long and drawn out. I didn't love it. So yeah, it pulled it down to a sort of 2.53 for me. Again, many trigger warnings in here for sexual assault, violence, death of a family member, domestic abuse, all sorts going on in here. But yeah, I really thought I was going to love it, but I didn't, which was a shame. Next up, another book from the Women's Prize for Fiction long list, which was The Dog of the North by Elizabeth Mackenzie. This was fine. I am perplexed as to why this was on the long list. There was nothing sort of special about it, or not sort of like representing a minority voice or an own voice or something like that, or dealing with a topic that needs a light shining on it or anything like that. It was just a book about a woman who there was sort of interesting aspects to this woman's life, but nothing really went into those. So her parents moved to Australia and then went missing, and I thought there'd be like deals with that and what it's like to be the daughter of a missing person. but that just got mentioned, and then that was sort of it. She popped to Australia for a little bit to visit her sister, and there was talks of that being more looked into, but it didn't. But the main thing is sort of like her grandparents are quite troublesome and big personalities, let's say, and she gets involved in a sort of friendship with her grandmother's accountant, and then becomes sort of like an owner of this van, which is called the Dog of the North. There's also a dog in here, but he doesn't feature very well. And yeah, I mean, you can tell from my face and the way I'm talking about it, like, it was all just bitty and sort of pulled together, and not even that much of a road trip. I think the blurb on the back said it was something about a road trip. There wasn't all that much of a road trip. Yeah, I was just perplexed as to why this had sort of made it, and yeah, it was fine, but I just feel like that about the whole thing. Next up was a DNF, and that was Pod by Layla and Paul, also from the Women's Prize long list. And I knew going into this that this was going to be a hard sell for me. I hadn't enjoyed Layline's earlier book, which was called The Bees, also shortlisted, in fact, for the Women's Prize in 2015. The Bees was about an anthropomorphised bee called Flora, 237 or something, a number after her name, and tells the inner workings of the hive and the jobs she was doing and things like that. And what I wanted from Flora was more personality, I think, and less sort of, this is what bees do, which is interesting, but I think I could have got that from a non-fiction book rather than this sort of book. And yeah, I didn't enjoy that book, and I went into Pod, which sounds very similar in that it's about a dolphin called Ia and her role in a pod. So, but there's also, apparently, I didn't get as far, I read it 28 pages and then I gave up. There's other parts, so you do hear from the perspective of other sea creatures and humans at some point in this book. But yeah, I read 28 pages and thought, I'm getting the same vibes as the bees here and I'm not enjoying it. And then following that, I went on the Bookcast Club podcast, and they'd just done an episode where they were talking purely about this book. And I thought, I'm going to listen to that, and I'm not bothered about spoilers, particularly when I'm reading something that I'm not that interested in, and I thought, I'll see what I feel. But yeah, apparently this book is absolutely littered with, like, incessant sexual assault. And I just was like, no, I haven't enjoyed it so far. I don't think sexual assault's gonna make me think, oh yeah, this has changed it for me. So I just gave up. And now it's made the shortlist. So yeah, that'll be one on the shortlist that I haven't read. It's gone back to the library yesterday, so that's how I felt about that. And then I read A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. I read this, I picked this from my shelf because I was doing, you may well have seen, I do these videos where I pick books off my shelf based on the first line. So I go through each colour, red, orange, yellow, green, work my way through and read the first line of each book and battle it against each other. And this one, this won the first line out of all of the first lines that I read for the month of April. So read this and really, really enjoyed it and had a lovely time with it. I had watched the film A Little Princess at a sleepover when I was, well, I think I was in year 5, because I remember I was at the house of somebody I used to be friends with in primary school, and we just sort of drifted apart quite quickly after I went to a different secondary school as her. So it must have been because I remember she had, this is so weird how I remember this, I remember she had lots of her new friends there, and I was a friend from the other school, and I remember watching A Little Princess. So how old would I have been, 13, 14? Yeah, so we watched A Little Princess, and that was a long time ago, so like 20 years ago. Wow. And I sort of remembered little aspects of the book, little like cinematic moments, and that was fun rediscovering these in print. But yeah, Sarah herself I really loved. She really reminded me of Anne of Green Gables. Weirdly, the Anne of Green Gables book I've also got in this copy, and that was the copy I read. So these characters, so Anne and Sarah, are just so full of sort of imagination and kindness and effervescence. And I loved reading about Sarah and her imagination, and the moment where she uses her imagination in her bedroom. So she ends up working for the boarding school that she goes to when her father's alive, and her father dies early on in the book and hasn't got any money. So the woman who owns, oh my god, there's a car driving past with 2 dogs hanging out the window, and they were both like so the woman who owns the boarding school gets her to work for her, and she is so cruel to her, and Sarah is left with nothing where before she had everything. and there's a moment where she's using her imagination to set a dining table in her little room, and using napkins to replicate gold plates, and putting a little bit of foil in the fire to make it look like there's a crackling fire. And those moments were just so warm, and I mean, ultimately, like, devastatingly sad, but like her imagination, using it to comfort herself and to comfort others. It was just so lovely to read, it really was. So yeah, I had a lovely time reading this. I gave it 3.5 stars, and yeah, good for me doing the old first line battle, because it's very, very good. I will read, every time I've mentioned this book, I've read the first line, but I really do think it's a fantastic first line, and it really does set the book up for how much warmth and comfort is in this book. So, once on a dark winter's day, when the yellow fog hung so thick and heavy in the streets of London that the lamps were lighted and the shop windows blazed with gas as they do at night, an odd-looking little girl sat in a cab with her father and was driven rather slowly through the big thoroughfares. Yeah, I had a lovely time with that. And then the last book that I read this month was I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel from the Women's Prize long list. Didn't make the short list. I can't believe it. This was the best book that I read this month. I gave this 4 stars. So not the best book I've read, not one of my well, may well be one of my favourites from this year so far. Yeah, do you know what? It probably is, but like, it hasn't reached the dizzy heights of a 4.5 or a 5, but still 4 stars, very high rating for me. And we're discussing this at Patreon Book Club tonight, so you may well have been part of Patreon Book Club, and then you're coming to watch me talk about this all over again. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed this. It reminded me very much of a sort of dark and toxic and terrifying Bridget Jones's Diary. It's told through stream of consciousness. Some of the chapters are literally like 4 pages long, some of them are longer, so it's a really quick read. But we're hearing from an unnamed narrator, and she's having an affair with a man who she calls the man I want to be with, and the man she wants to be with is also having another affair. He's married, he's sleeping with our unnamed narrator. He's also sleeping with, what does she call her? How does she refer to her? The woman I am obsessed with, she calls her that. And the woman she's obsessed with has a very prominent online presence. She's got quite the following. She sort of lives this beautiful sort of minimalistic life with an online store where she's selling sort of handkerchiefs for like $200 and vases for $600 and all of this sort of thing. And the woman so our unnamed narrator is obsessed with her, and you sort of, as it's a stream of consciousness, she's going through the sort of like, it might be so intricate as like she's talking about scrolling through her feed and these photos she's so familiar with because she follows her like every day. Well, she doesn't follow her. She goes on her Instagram page every day. And yeah, it sort of highlights the sort of absurdity of what it's like to be obsessed with, or even to be part of a sort of online space of someone. So the woman she's obsessed with talks about her Instagram page as being a really calming area for people, and sort of like what sort of ego you must have to be able to sort of say that. But yeah, it really highlights the absurdity of fandom and stuff like that. And it got me thinking about different things that I'm a fan of and the experiences I've had around that. And something that I was thinking about a lot is that I'm part of a Call the Midwife fan group on Facebook, fan page, and although like it's supposed to be about like how excited people are about the new Call the Midwife and all, they've started filming, and oh, have you seen the trailer for the Christmas special, and oh, Helen George is in this play and she's doing this, but at the heart of this sort of fandom page, it's just women being fucking horrible to each other, and like saying, oh, you've spelt this wrong, oh, thanks, I'm in America and I haven't seen that episode yet, oh, like, and just so much awful sort of toxicity around the fandom, and that really sort of like was reflected in this. But yeah, I thought this was magnificent, really, really impressive piece of writing. But I do think it will be highly, highly divisive. The unnamed narrator, she's awful. She's in a seemingly loving relationship, but treats her boyfriend like pure shit. The man she's obsessed with, the man she wants to be with, he is also awful. Like the way he treats her and the way he treats other women, and his double standards are just disgusting. And then the woman she's obsessed with is just this sort of like absurd, out of reach character who's so caught up in her own sort of ego and stuff like that. So yeah, I thought it was, yeah, like I said, magnificent. Really, really enjoyed it, but I do think this will be highly, highly divisive. So there we go. the books that I read in the month of April, 9 of them and 1 DNF. Let me know if you've read any of these books. Let me know what you think of these books. Let me know what you read in April. What was the favourite book that you read in April? And I'll see you all again tomorrow for my May TBR. See you then. Bye!